So is now the right time for you to jump in the housing market and make that purchase? Well, given what I'm seeing in the local real estate data, combining that with seasonal trends that happen every year, plus the outlook for the future, I'm going to dive into some information in this video to give you my 2 cents on whether or not now, right now, is a good time to hop into the housing market. Let's start with a little quote, a quote that I love from Warren Buffett. It says, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." And this is one of those things to think about the market in a contrarian or the opposite of the crowd way. You know, in that hot pandemic market, everybody was lining up to buy homes, but conversely, you know, it actually maybe wasn't the best time to pay premium prices, bid over asking. You know, prices have slid back since then. Now the news headlines would tell you that, you know, there's potentially a huge crash coming and now is not a great time to buy a home, when the opposite might be true. So let's dig into some of the information. And the first thing I want to show you is the trend in the month's supply of homes. So the month's supply of homes is a statistical indicator we use to track whether the market is a buyer's market or a seller's market. But I think it's helpful to break down what that even means, because sometimes we can be using industry lingo here. So a buyer's market is generally a market where there is lots of supply, lots of homes for sale, and fewer buyers. So generally the buyers have a lot of choice, they can take their time, you're going to be making an offer under the asking price and negotiating a deal, and you can even have conditions like home inspection, financing. You may even have time to get your current property sold as a condition of the offer. So that's a buyer's market. The opposite, a seller's market, is when there's actually not that many homes for sale, but there's lots of people that want to buy them. So the buyers are competing with each other to buy those homes. So you end up seeing a very fast-paced market. You see multiple offers going in on properties, properties selling over asking, and the winning buyer potentially having to remove their conditions or come in with an all-cash deal and take a lot of risk on their side of the transaction. So I'm curious, as you're listening to this, you know, as a buyer, would you rather be purchasing a home in a buyer's market or purchasing a home in a seller's market? Let me know in the comments. I know what my thoughts are, but it's strange to think that a lot of people actually would go with the crowd and rather be a buyer in a seller's market, because that's when everybody else is buying. But you actually want to be a buyer in a buyer's market, and that's for the first time in a while, we're seeing that right now. So let's take a look at this chart I have up here. It actually goes back all the way to 2010. And it's showing us a lot about our market. The first thing you can see is there's definitely a seasonality. You can see this up and down every single year. We typically get the highest month supply in the summer, and that's after the ramp up of all the new listings coming on the market in the spring. But then in the summer, the buyer demand slows down a little bit. So every year we see the most buyer skewed part of the market usually being in the summer. Then, you know, unintuitively, it actually slides down to a more seller-focused market, usually in the winter. And that's not because demand takes off, it's actually because supply slows way down. And we're gonna get into that. Stick around at the very end of this video. I've got my little insider, tip about all this, but we'll explain it in more detail. What happens is homes come off the market, not many come up for sale, but there's still a constant level of demand. So we actually see usually in the winter months, things slide back to a little more seller-centric in terms of looking at the month supply. So that's the first thing to look at, is this seasonality. Now, if we zoom out and look at just the overall curve here, you can see that back in 2010, 2011, 2012, it was normal for it to be from 4 to 6 months supply. And we would consider that, you know, balanced in and into a buyer's market. And in terms of real estate, you know, 2010 is ancient history right now. I don't know anybody that kind of is thinking back that far, but I wanted to zoom out and show you this just to see the longer term trend. Because then what started happening into 2012, 2013, and especially 2014, 2015, 2016, is our market got busier and busier, right? And when I mean that, it means there was more and more demand for the homes and not any more homes coming up for sale. So you can see that month supply trending downwards to a low point right there in the early part of 2017. And now before the pandemic, that was the first, you know, really hot market that we'd ever seen. We'd never really seen the month supply go this low in Brantford. And so that ran for about 6 months. The government came in and had a bunch of cooling measures mid-year, around June that year. And you see the market kind of stabilized a little bit. And over the remainder of 2017, but definitely into 2018, 2019, into the end of 2019, you saw the market sliding back up a little bit calmer. It definitely didn't get back into buyer's market territory, but it rose up from that crazy low level of 2017. Then as we started the year in 2020, things were already starting to feel like they were heating up. Interest rates were pretty low. The demand pushing out from the GTA was already happening, but then the pandemic hit. And that kind of froze up the housing market. It really froze up the supply side. So a lot of people chose not to put their homes on the market because they were hunkered down. We were being told to stay at home, right? But then there was a whole other group of people that were looking for more housing to try to get out of the major cities or move into a place where they had a home office or they had their own backyard or their own pool or whatever. So you saw a huge surge in demand, but a constriction in supply. And there you see again the rapid decline through the pandemic to a low point in December 2022, where it was the most seller-focused market we'd ever seen in the history of real estate. Now, coming out of that, around March 2022, we saw the government come in and start raising interest rates, intentionally cooling the housing market. And you can see the effects that's had. And since that low point there, on the far right side of this chart, we've seen it rise up. And now where we're sitting today is actually the most in favor of the buyers the market has been. If we go across the chart backwards, it's the most in favor it's been since around 2014, right? So it hasn't been since 2014 where it's been this in favor of the buyers. So the window is definitely open. Now, what's happening with this number is we actually expect it to curve back down. With that seasonality into the winter, it should actually lower again, but not back to these crazy lows. And we don't really expect with next year's market, I'm going to give a couple trends in a minute, that this really falls or rises too much. I think it's going to hang out in this area for a while. So the window's wide open in a way that it hasn't been since about 2014 if you're a buyer looking to buy in buyer's market conditions. So that's point number one. Second point we have to look at here is the conditions actually on the ground. So it's all good to look at a chart, but when you're out there actually shopping, when you feel the difference. Now, if you're a buyer in Brantford, you have a lot of choice. We have homes ranging from, sub $400,000, including condos, townhomes, but even single family homes. And we've got stuff all the way up to the million plus mark. So depending on your budget, it's going to feel a little bit different. I'm going to tell you this basic piece of advice. The higher your budget is, the more buyer focused the market is. So if you've got a lot of money to spend or you're coming from another city where the home prices are higher, you're actually going to be at a very large advantage. If you have over $800,000 of a budget, you're in a very strong buyer's market. Lower down the chain, and as more affordability happens, it is still a little more favoring the sellers, and we are still seeing some multiple offers. But compared to where we were just a couple of years ago, it's all cooled off. The other thing we're noticing is the days on market has risen. So that means the pace of the sale of properties has slowed down. When it was like sub 1 week in the middle of the pandemic, that meant there were multiple offers, no conditions on almost every property that sold. Now we're seeing the median days on market around the 30-day mark, and that's just the midpoint. So that means, half of the homes are selling over 30 days on market and half under. For you as a buyer, that means you have a little more breathing room. You can come in on the weekend and see 4 or 5 houses, compare them to each other, sleep on it, right, and make a decision. So that's a really important one. And then the third one is really that buyer competition. When we saw at the peak of the pandemic, we're seeing 10%, 20%, 25% over asking offers. These wild unconditional cash offers that were significantly over asking, that's not the norm anymore. The average offer price has come down under 100%, which means that you're typically the only person offering on a property, especially if it's one that's been on the market for a few weeks already. And that means that you can go back and forth and negotiate a discount off the asking price. You're going to be able to include conditions of financing approval, home inspection. You might be even including a condition that you need to get your home sold. And that's becoming more and more common. So all these things are good news if you're a home buyer. The next thing we want to talk about is the pricing trends, right? Because this is the one that I think makes people a little fearful. But remember, if everyone else is fearful, as Warren Buffett says, this is the time to be greedy. So if we zoom out and look back, this chart actually only goes back 5 years. It only goes back to 2018. If I made it go back even further, it would be even more dramatic. But even just over the last 5 years, housing prices are up 84% in our community. What you can see is this from 2018 to kind of 2020, the line in that curve is pretty calm, but it is heading upwards. That's our normal pace of appreciation. And then you saw what happened. You see these spikes in pricing, and both of them came in the early part of the year. And that is pretty typical that we see our pricing spike at the beginning of the selling season, and then things kind of level off for the year. And that's because, again, when we have those lower inventory environments and the demand rushes back in, buyers have to compete, and buyers competing is what pushes the price up. So as we look forward to what's been going on now, we had a peak in our pricing just back in February 2022, and then for almost all of 2022, pricing slid downwards. And that hit a bottom 1 year ago last month, which is October 2022. We hit this low point, and since then, like a little stock chart, it's been ticking up and down, but you can see the trend is definitely that prices are pushing up a little bit. So we're basically back to 2021's, average sale price. So buying a house today is like you got in a time machine and went back and bought it in 2021. And you avoided the big upswing and the big downswing of the beginning and end of 2022. So the prediction is what happens next, right? And a few things to have on our radar. Number one is it seems like we are at the very end of the interest rate increase cycle. So that means that the next move would be for interest rates to start coming back down. Now, we don't know the specific timing around that, but we're pretty sure that's the next thing that's going to happen. If they're done going up, the next thing must be eventually they're going to come down. And when interest rates come down, that increases the buying power of all buyers in the marketplace. And we see what happened the last time interest rates were super low. That's what caused the prices to rapidly increase. So if interest rates start to come down, we're going to see price pressure push back up on the houses. That's point number one. Point number two is Brantford is in a high growth phase, specifically our city. We're identified in the Ontario Places to Grow Act as an urban growth center, and the target is for there to be 160,000 plus people in this town by 2041. There's only 100,000 now, so that's about a 60% growth to the population. I don't see 60% growth to our base of housing. I don't see all these new houses being built in that time. So the issue there is that we're going to see increased demand for the same number of houses in our town as more and more people come and make this their hometown. And that's again going to push pricing back up in the future. And then the third thing is still that we are a very affordable community as far as the Greater Golden Horseshoe goes. We're still significantly less than Cambridge and Waterloo and Guelph and Kitchener, and definitely way less than if you go down the road to Burlington, Oakville, Mississauga, or anywhere closer to the GTA. So as those prices keep pushing back up, more and more people are getting pushed westward or south from their towns to find something more affordable. So generally in Brantford, you're going to be able to buy a bigger house with a bigger yard, have a little more room to breathe if you're willing, if you can work from home or you're willing to commute to your job. So all those three things combined give me a lot of positivity about the future price appreciation. Now I will say, we can't time the market in the short term. So where the pricing chart goes over the next 12 months, it might go a little up, might go a little down. It all depends on a lot of factors. But we're not buying real estate speculatively. We want to buy it and then we're planning on living there for 3, 5 plus years. If you're doing that, I think you're in a really good position. And I'm feeling like, if you've zoomed out 5 years to the future and you look back, you will have said, okay, this was a really good time to buy a home. So those are the big two ones, right? The fact that we're seeing the month's supply skew us back towards a more buyer-centric market, more than we've seen since 2014. So these are the best conditions if you are a buyer in a long time, right? Almost a decade. Number two is that the pricing has come back down from its peaks. So we're buying a home today at 2021 prices, and all indicators are pointing towards price growth in the future. And then the third little secret thing that I want to tell you that I see happening real time, it happens every year and I'm watching it happen right now, is that because the market's a little cooler this year, you've got a bunch of home sellers who have been on the market potentially since spring, maybe since summer, or even just since this fall, but they haven't been able to get their home sold. There's some excess inventory, but they want it sold, right? They put it up for sale. A lot of them need it sold. But what we start to see happening right around this time of year is you start to see sellers taking their home off the market because they have this belief that, oh, we didn't get the job done, you know, Christmas is coming, winter's coming, so I'm just going to take it off the market and try again next year. But then, you know, by that time, we don't know what the market conditions are going to be like. But right now, before they pull their home off the market, we have a chance to go look at those higher days on market homes and try an offer, right? Now, we don't necessarily know if they're going to be super negotiable or not, and that's where our work comes in. You know, if you like a higher days on market property, I start doing some research. I'm going to call the listing agent, try to figure out how motivated that seller is. But that's where I'm seeing people get really good deals right now, is we're finding the properties that other people have overlooked. We're not jumping into those fresh listings in competition, but we're looking for ones that maybe need a little bit of extra work. Maybe they were overpriced to begin with, and they've had a couple price reductions. And if we can catch those before they take them off the market for Christmas and fire that like last chance offer at these people to say, hey, here's an offer that could get this done instead of taking it off the market and trying it again next year, you'd be surprised how many of those sellers are willing to negotiate. So my 3 big reasons to get a deal done this season. Again, number 1, as the buyer, you got more power than you've had in almost a decade. Number 2, prices have come way down from their peaks and they look like they have bottomed out, and we have some healthy appreciation ahead of us in the future. And number 3, there's deals to be had. Every day I'm looking in the system, I'm thinking, oh wow, that person got a really good deal. So don't hesitate to contact me for some tailored specific advice. Of course, affordability is a little rough right now. Qualifying for a mortgage is tough, but we've got strategies to help you. If you want to get into the housing market, I think the window's wide open, and let me be your guide and give you a strategy. All my contact information is below. Please like and subscribe to my channel if this was valuable to you, and we'll catch you on the next video.